The story didn't slow down after the indictments dropped. It accelerated. Now that the world knew what the feds had been building, every bar Vaughn had ever spit got replayed with a new lens. Every lyric about spinning blocks, dropping bags, or sliding on the ops suddenly sounded less like entertainment and more like evidence. Songs became exhibits. Music videos became case studies. The line between art and confession blurred beyond recognition, and Vaughn wasn't even here to speak for himself. But in death, he became even louder. Every unreleased track, puzzle piece. Every leaked video, a timestamp. He had documented everything, whether on purpose or not. And in the world of federal investigations, that kind of digital footprint is gold. Because it's not just about who pulled the trigger. It's about who planned it, who encouraged it, who benefited from it. And in the narrative prosecutors were building, Vaughn was more than a rapper. He was an alleged general. But the streets still saw him as a martyr. Because in their eyes, Vaughn wasn't organizing crime, he was defending a legacy. Protecting his people. Reacting to a world that had tried to kill him before he even had a chance to live. From his earliest days, Vaughn had been surrounded by death. His cousin, his friends, his ops. It wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when. So by the time he blew up, paranoia wasn't a mood. It was a survival skill. That's why he moved the way he did. Fast. Aggressive. Always armed. Always watching. Because he knew that in the same way he had enemies on the streets, he had enemies in silence. People who smiled in his face but screenshot at his every move. The blogs that lifted him up when he dropped Crazy Story were the same ones that dissected his mugshots. Fame never came free. And it wasn't just the police watching. The music industry was watching too. Executives in high-rise offices saw dollar signs every time Vaughn dropped a snippet. They saw a wave of raw, real, unfiltered. Drill was no longer just a Chicago phenomenon. It had gone global. UK drill, Bronx drill, even K-pop drill, it all traced back to the blood-soaked blueprint of Chicago. And Vaughn? He was the last king of that era. The one who brought it full circle. From war stories in the trenches to billboards in Times Square. But that image came at a cost. Because once you become a symbol, you stop being a person. And Vaughn, he had become a symbol of everything the feds were trying to dismantle. A gang-affiliated millionaire. A violent past wrapped in luxury fashion. A walking contradiction. On one hand, he gave back. Bought his people cars, paid lawyer fees, got his guys out the hood. On the other, he was allegedly still orchestrating hits. Still paying for drills. Still knee-deep in the very life he rapped about escaping. And that's what made him dangerous. Not just to his enemies, but to the system itself. Because the system doesn't know what to do with someone like Vaughn. You can't box him in. You can't pin him down. He was both the victim and the villain. The traumatized and the trigger man. The kid who lost everything and the man who took lives in return. And the government? They don't deal in nuance. They deal in charges. Indictments. Mandatory minimums. So when the RICO indictment dropped for Duck's murder, it sent a message. That no one is untouchable. That even if you die, your name can still be used as evidence. And that was the real shift. Because now, rappers weren't just targets of violence. They were targets of investigations. Lyrics became motive. Tweets became premeditation. Even emojis got cited in court. And O'Block, it started to fold in on itself. The silence was loud. Instagram went cold. No more flexing. No more wild lives. Just ghost accounts and legal teams. Because when the feds knock, they don't knock twice. And once they've built a case, it's already too late. That's why the conviction rate for federal RICO cases is over 90%. They don't come to play, they come to bury. But the music didn't stop. Vaughn's team kept dropping posthumous tracks. Each one felt like a message from the grave. Sometimes celebratory, sometimes eerie, and fans ate it up. His name trended on TikTok weekly. His face was on murals from Atlanta to Ghana. But behind the art was a darker truth. His voice was now being monetized by everyone but him. The label made millions. YouTube channels made millions. Blogs cashed in. Even people who never knew him, never stepped foot in Parkway, were profiting off his story. That's the cruelty of posthumous fame. You don't get to control your own legacy. And for Vaughn, that legacy was complicated. Because while fans screamed, "Long live V. Roy," mothers of the dead screamed for justice. For every mural of Vaughn, there was a grieving family with no closure. And that's the duality the mainstream refuses to face. That legends can be loved and feared. That icons can be guilty and still mourned. That the streets can cry for someone who the courts would have crucified. But maybe that's what made Vaughn who he was. He never pretended to be a role model. Never faked the piece. He wore his demons on his sleeve and put his sins in the booth. And people respected that. Because at least it was honest. He didn't hide behind PR teams or fake activism. He was raw. And in a world of filtered realities, that kind of authenticity is rare. Still, it came at a price. Because when the next phase of the investigation began, it wasn't just about Duck. It was about patterns. The feds started re-examining other cases. Old shootings. Old affiliations. They started looking at who was funding who was moving weight, who had bank accounts that didn't match their income. And slowly, the web expanded. More names. More sealed indictments. Whispers of a bigger RICO. One that wouldn't stop at O-Block. One that might stretch into labels. Into execs. Into the platforms that push the music. Because once the government decides drill isn't just music but organized crime, everyone who touched it becomes a potential target. And that's the nightmare that still lingers. Because Vaughn's death wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a different kind of war. A war in the courts. In the comment sections. In the public perception. Where one narrative says King Vaughn was a demon and another says King Vaughn was a product of his environment. And maybe both are true. Because Vaughn never got a chance to change his story. His arc stopped at 26. Mid-sentence. Mid-album. Mid-beef. And now the question isn't just who killed him. It's who gets to define him. The feds have their version. The fans have theirs. The streets have another. But the real Vaughn? The kid who watched his friends die before they turned 18? The one who started writing raps in a cell while fighting a body? The one who made it out only to get gunned down in front of a hookah lounge? That version may never fully be known. But maybe that's the point. Because in the world Vaughn came from, legends aren't supposed to live forever. They're supposed to go out in flames. In headlines. In hashtags. That's what makes them eternal. And in that way, whether you see him as a menace or a martyr, King Vaughn got exactly what the streets promised. Immortality. At a price no one should have to pay.